What up, dudes? We haven't done a freaking mechanical breakdown, Johnson, in a while, so let's do it. First and foremost, shout out to OnForm. OnForm is dialed in. Let me show you guys what they're capable of doing now. Is you can double tap these colors and you can actually choose the specific color you want to work with. Me, typically, I'll use pink, neon green, bright red, bright yellow, volt, all these dope colors that you can find on the color spectrum or the slider or the grid. So many options. And then you get all these different options here for the boldness of your stroke line. Look at this. Hey, see how that's totally different than that one? That's because OnForm made a huge upgrade to their app and their interface, and it gives you more customization ability than ever before. Shout out to OnForm, and you can download OnForm today from the App Store, so be sure to go do that. I'm a huge fan of Spencer Schwellenbach. Why? Because this is like the epitome of mechanical efficiency in the pitching delivery. Let me just play at full speed. And let's take into consideration this is a warm-up pitch and it's a little cut Johnson. A lot of things to like. All right, let's do a full little breakdown here. First, initial move, rhythmic movements of the hands and the feet. Feet go up, hands go up, create a pendulum act. That's going to assist in your timing. The throw is all timing, right? Like the goal is to try to get into specific powerful postures on a consistent, repeatable basis, specifically the release point. So when we look at the initial move, like the goal of that is to try to complement, the timing of all of these events. Our brains do really well with rhythmic movements. Now, certain people actually need the opposite. Certain people need like a little stagnation to get them going. But I would say for 80 to 90% of throwers are going to need a little rhythmic movement here in the initial move, just to make sure that the timing of everything, right? Like the timing of the hands, when the hands separate from the glove is the time in which the lead leg is probably going to be descending. The descending of the peak leg lift, now we enter the drive phase. The drive phase is a phase in which we are driving down the slope using gravity and using what the slope gives us, being the only overhead athletes that get to throw on a slope. It's going to allow us to accelerate into our anchor point. Now, the drive phase starts off with the loading phase, right? So we want to essentially load up the drive. Absorb, produce, store, right? And we look at the throw as we look at energy. The throw, the pitching, delivery, everything that we're looking at here when we break these things down, all we're looking at is how do we get energy consumption and then how do we get it back, right? So what we put in, what we're going to get out. It's not always the case though, right? Because we're moving through free space. There's a lot of instability issues, right? Like certain things can go early. The slope is usually where mechanics go to die, all these kind of components, right? What do I mean by absorb? Descending from peak leg lift, there's weight to catch, there's force to catch and stabilize, right? So you're essentially looking at it like if you had a scale under that drive foot, and now as you descend from that peak leg lift, right, that drive foot's going to get heavier. Now this is where the absorption of that energy, which is going to then produce ground force energy. How do we store it though? This is where the capacity plays a huge role into it. The stability, Schwellenbach, nice with it too, right? Because when we load up the drive, absorb, produce, store, there's got to be components that we can do with our body that help assist this loading phase, right? What do I mean by components? I like to look at the lead leg. This is a big one when we look at like the lead leg counterbalance. What is the lead leg counterbalance? Lead leg counterbalance is essentially an aggressive extension of the lead leg knee outward to essentially counterbalance your loading to where when you do descend from this peak leg lift and you go to load, it doesn't just take your body and pull it towards like third base side if you're a righty. If you were to do like a pistol squat, kind of the same concept you do with your hands out. It's kind of the same mechanism you can use to counterbalance your weight. Also, what that does is I find that it's a mechanism that locks this in, locks your pelvis, locks your hips in, and that's going to then allow them to hold and truly store that energy. We talked about absorb, produce, store. Absorbing, descending from leg lift, there's energy to be had. Absorb it, produce it. That's going to then go into what we can produce into the ground. The storing it is the building essentially of it. So you want to essentially like delay. I don't like to use the word delay, but you don't want the pelvis, you don't want the hips to start rotating earlier, because that's just going to be the slow unwinding, unraveling, leaking of energy. I think the counterbalance of the lead leg locks in the pelvis. So then when we do go throughout our drive phase, it's a snap into rotation. You can delay that rotation. The more you can delay the rotation and snap it in a very time sensitive manner, the more energy you're just going to be able to capture, right? So if our pelvis is leaking early, we don't lead leg counterbalance. We try to gain acceleration with the lead foot, or we try to gain an inauthentic stride with the lead foot and try to create ground. That's where our ischius gets thrown out of alignment, right? And we try to force a lot of things that should happen organically. The lead leg counterbalance, separation of the hands, these typically occur at the same time, but this is a really good posture to look at, is like when you start to initiate the separation of your hands, what do you look like? Schwellenbach, really good example, eyes locked in. That's going to keep his cervical rotation locked to where he doesn't have to pull his torso to open up space to see where he's going. And you can see the simplified hand path too, man. Like this is such a nice visual of what he's got going on. It stays inside of his body, equal opposite. Throwing arm's going to kind of match and mirror the glove arm, and then you can hold, right? You can hold the drive leg. Lead leg is served as the brake pedal. Drive leg is the gas pedal. Always remember that. We don't ever want to force acceleration with the lead leg. Like I said earlier, that's going to throw off alignment and kind of make things a little bit inorganic, if you will. Now we're in the load phase. We're at the center point of the load phase, and I would say this is where we can see, like, people are going to throw around the terminologies vertical shin. That's a really good posture to be in. He's going to use a mechanism of a little counter rotation of his torso, the glove arm a little bit behind, and you can see the pelvis is still locked in. I wish we could see the front foot, the lead foot, just to see the angle of that. He's putting in energy into the ground, and then, like I said, the snapping of that pelvis. This is another phase in the delivery that I really like to look at, is retract and rotate. When we look at postures, I do believe postures are like really important. I don't think we should ever really look at stills and just be like, get in that position. Like I do believe they matter, but as I said, I think how you've gotten into them, how you organically get into them is going to be a little bit more important. So the retract and rotate phase is just a really good mechanism to look at in terms of the timing and the sequencing of all of these energy flows. He does a really good job. Like we talked about, the lead leg counterbalance, the foot starting to open up. I don't think these are starting to go. Usually you can see the drive foot heel is a good indication. Like when that starts to peel back, depending on each individual and how their foot ankle kind of is structured, because a lot of that stuff could actually pull the foot off early and force the hips to go early, quad dominant loaders specifically. But Schwellenbach's really good example of kind of just more of an organic movements of his lower half. So now we get put into the retract and rotate. So it's just a timing mechanism. Again, we're trying to not only just create copious amounts of energy during our throw, but we're trying to receive as much as we can. A lot of times we do a good job of what looks like the creation of a good amount of energy, but then it's like, I'm not throwing hard, you're not getting a whole lot back. So the retract and rotate is a nice kind of mechanical movement representation of this energy flow happening. So usually when you see this move, of which this is retracting while this is rotating, it's going to be a pretty good viewpoint for, is he able to capture this in time? With Schwellenbach, you can see as that starts to retract, horizontal shoulder abduction, you can see the snap effect. Remember, this is like fast in real time, right? Holding, storing that, and then snapping it, and this retracting. So this is rotational energy. I talked about ground force energy being important, forward acceleration energy. Rotational athletes, man, like that's going to account for the majority of how we see velocity in pitching. So we want to make sure we're getting rotational energy, and the way we do that is by segmenting rotations. We want the lower half to initiate rotation first, while the upper half essentially stays neutral until the point in which we anchor down. So we can find ourselves in postures like this, where we're stacked, we're neutral, glove side's peeled just a little bit. This is still in its retraction phase. It's going to create a little bit of chest stretch. That's a little bit more tension that we can have in our throw. Hips are into rotation. Lead leg is flexed, so we can then rotate the pelvis into that femur. We have the stability, boom. Alignment matters, posture matters, because a lot of us, if we don't have that optimal positioning when we do anchor down, we're fighting an uphill battle. So the positioning and postures do matter in that sense, because we want to align us to be able to block and receive those energies that we're trying to get, right? So the retract and rotate leads us into this phase. You can see the timing of the hips rotating. I mean, this is happening so fast, right? You hold, organic, and then boom, you start to then anchor as you snap into rotation. So it's a rotation into front foot strike, not a rotation then front foot strike. A lot of times you'll see the pelvis, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, it'll unwind throughout the drive phase, and then you just kind of fall into your anchor point instead of really rotating. You can see, like I said earlier with the foot, I wish we could see it a little bit better, but you can see usually the foot rotate into anchor point. And then what you have is you just have an anchor point posture that's very tension based, right? Like I said, with the hips, torso, that's going to create that rotational energy effect. The glove side peel, throwing shoulder a little bit more retracted, that's going to create the stretch and tension of the chest. And then what you want to do is, when we segment like Schwellenbach, you want to capture it. Capturing it is a very time sensitive maneuver, and it demands us to have these postures with our upper body, and especially our throwing arm, to be in a position to receive this energy, right? So if we're dragging our throwing arms out here outside, disconnected from 90, we're not going to be able to really capture that. If it's down, if it's dragging, right, it has to flip up and then pull early. There's a lot of components that obviously pitchers, really good compensators, you'll start to see, but this is picture perfect. That's why I wanted to do this visual representation. This is picture perfect because he's like his hand separation, I think his hand path throughout the entire phase here, you can see, was just so simple. Stays inside the body and then it just retracts, equal opposite. Boom. And then so when he does land, he has that there to catch. He's connected. And then now as these complete rotation, like I said earlier, as it rotates into the femur, that's going to be where our block phase occurs. And then the upper body is going to then get pulled. The torso is going to get pulled as the hips complete rotation, and all of this energy flow, man, it's coming up. And this is where it gets super time sensitive, right? Because we're trying to capture all this. And if you can see, a really good viewpoint is if we do this right, certain things happen that you can see with the lead leg block. We anchor down, hips complete, torso initiates, torso pulls the arm gets pulled into release. That's going to create us arm speed. Arm speed is not created by the arm independently. Arm speed is created by what we're talking about here with segmentation mechanics and capturing of that rotational energy. So boom, and we pull it through. Torso is going to go out and get it, dog. Go get it. And then the hips stay into extension. That's a pretty good testament to see if we're getting this energy flow up and being able to receive it out through the hand. And at ball release, we're a little fuzzy here with the video quality, but we're going to grind through it. Boom, rotated against that. Again, the lead leg block, it doesn't need to extend, right? You don't need to Justin Verlander hyperextend your front leg. As long as it's blocking all forward energy, dude, that's the goal, right? And again, another thing I'm liking to see, dude, is the trail leg. We want that to stay in extension because that's the flow of energy we're talking about. We're talking about flows of energies and being able to capture them. Certain body compensations that occur that we can see when an athlete's not truly capturing all of this, right? This is where the instability issues happen, is if you'd see the trail leg actively shoot into flexion, which would be a red flag. The block would shoot forward, right? Knee valgus, if you want to throw around fancy big words. Torso would be well behind the lead knee, and the throwing shoulder and the glove side shoulder would be in line with each other. If we were looking at it right from the side, I would say are all components of like not truly getting the energy back that you want to throw hard. What we have, dude, is picture perfect, right? The glove side kind of blocks this rotational phase of the torso to allow us to receive a little bit more energy. The arm gets pulled through to slot, and then we have a freaking great window of deceleration here as the glove side gets out, lead leg finally comes up, and we're locked. So, wow. Spencer Schwellenbacher. That was cool, man. Hand rhythm, descend into your drive phase, lead leg extension. Simplicity and effectiveness. You know, if we have someone that has a very controlled and repeatable, simplistic delivery that can get themselves into postures when it matters most, right? Strong, optimal postures when it matters most, we're going to be in a good spot. You guys like the way I talk about pitching mechanics? Go check out my pitching mechanics ebook, A Complete Guide to Pitching Mechanics. Everything I know about pitching mechanics, I wrote it down in an ebook. Go check that out. Also, you can reach out to me if you have any particular questions not related to pitching or related to pitching. Mental game, let's rock, dude. throbbyrowshow.com/ask. And if you want to book a remote analysis with me, dude, let's ride. I'll get super nerdy, give you a full report, give you progressions, everything to lock you in long term. I'll include all those links in the description of this YouTube video. And I'm still currently actively working on a remote coaching platform, so stay tuned for that as well. All right. Hey, as always, much love, guys. I'm Robby Rowe. This is OnForm. Be sure to go check that out, the App Store. You guys won't subscribe to my YouTube. See ya.